The knock on my door at 7 in the morning told me everything I needed to know about how my Saturday was going to go, and I was right to dread opening it. Standing on my porch in Beaverton, Oregon, with her arms crossed and her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval, was Brenda Morrison, president of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment and clutched her ever-present leather folder against her chest like it was a holy scripture. "Vincent Zimmerman," she said, not waiting for me to greet her. "We need to discuss a matter of utmost importance regarding your property." I rubbed my eyes and leaned against the doorframe. "Brenda, it's 7 in the morning on a Saturday. Whatever violation you think I've committed can wait until at least noon." "This isn't about a violation," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "This is about community cooperation and responsibility. May I come in?" Every instinct told me to say no, but I also knew that Brenda would make my life infinitely more difficult if I refused. I stepped aside and let her enter my home, a modest 2-story house I'd purchased 3 years ago. The place had been my sanctuary, my escape from the chaos of my job as a project manager at a manufacturing plant. At least, it had been my sanctuary until I discovered that living in an HOA meant your sanctuary was subject to the whims of people like Brenda. She walked straight into my living room without removing her shoes, which annoyed me more than it probably should have. I followed her and waited. "I'll get straight to the point," Brenda said, turning to face me. "The heating system at the community center has failed, completely and irreparably. The contractor we hired says it will take at least 6 weeks to get the parts we need, and the repair will cost upwards of $40,000. "That's unfortunate," I said, unsure where this was going. "But I don't see what that has to do with me." Brenda's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile if it had reached her eyes. "Well, Vincent, we've done our research. Your property has a state-of-the-art geothermal heating system that you installed last year. We've calculated that your system could easily support the community center in addition to your home. We're asking that you share your heating resources with the community until the repairs are complete." I stared at her for a long moment, waiting for the punchline. When none came, I said, "You want me to what? Share your heating system," she repeated, as if saying it slower would make it sound more reasonable. "We can have contractors run lines from your property to the community center. It's only 100 yards away. This would be a temporary solution that would save the HOA significant money and keep the center operational." "Brenda, I can't just share my heating system. It doesn't work like that." "Of course it does," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Heat is heat. Your system produces excess capacity, and we're simply asking you to redirect some of that excess to help your neighbors." "No," I said firmly. "The answer is no. That system was engineered specifically for this house. It's not designed to heat additional buildings." Her expression hardened. "I should remind you that according to the HOA bylaws, Section 12, Paragraph 7, all homeowners are required to cooperate with community initiatives that serve the greater good." "I'm familiar with the bylaws," I said, keeping my voice level. "That clause refers to things like volunteering for events or allowing access for utility maintenance. It doesn't mean I have to literally give you my heating system." "We're not asking you to give us anything," Brenda said. "We're asking you to share, temporarily, as a good neighbor would. And I'm telling you it's not possible. My system is sized for one building only. Mine." Brenda pulled a document from her leather folder and held it out to me. "This is a formal request from the HOA board. We're giving you 72 hours to comply voluntarily. After that, we'll be forced to take additional measures." I didn't take the document. "What kind of measures?" daily fines for non-compliance with community initiatives, $500 per day as outlined in the bylaws. And we'll also be reviewing your property for any other potential violations that may have been overlooked. You're threatening me. I'm informing you of consequences, she said, placing the document on my coffee table. We expect your cooperation, Vincent. This community works because people work together. Don't be the person who puts himself above his neighbors. She left without another word, and I stood in my living room feeling like I'd just been hit by a truck. The document on my coffee table might as well have been a bomb. I picked it up and read through it, my anger building with every word. The letter claimed that my refusal to share my heating system constituted a failure to support community welfare, and that the HOA board had unanimously voted to require my compliance. It cited several sections of the bylaws, all of which had been twisted to support their absurd demand. I grabbed my phone and called my neighbor, Marcus Chen, who lived 2 doors down. Marcus had served on the HOA board until last year when he'd gotten fed up with Brenda's increasingly authoritarian approach. "Vincent," he answered. "What's up? Did you know about this heating system thing?" There was a pause. "I heard rumors. Brenda really came to you about it." "She just left my house. Marcus, they're threatening to fine me $500 a day if I don't let them hook my heating system up to the community center." "That's insane. Your system can't handle that kind of load." "I know that. You know that. But Brenda doesn't care. She just sees a free solution to her problem." Marcus sighed. "Look, I know a good lawyer who specializes in HOA disputes. Her name is Patricia Jenkins. I'll text you her number. You need to call her on Monday." "Monday might be too late. They gave me 72 hours. Call her anyway. And in the meantime, document everything. Every interaction, every letter, every threat. You're going to need it." After hanging up with Marcus, I spent the rest of the morning researching geothermal heating systems, even though I already knew the answer. I'd worked with the contractor for months when I'd installed it, making sure every aspect was perfect. The system used a series of underground pipes filled with a water antifreeze mixture that absorbed heat from the earth in winter and dissipated heat in summer. The heat pump then transferred that energy to heat or cool my house. The system was precisely calculated based on the square footage of my home, the insulation values, the number of windows, and dozens of other factors. Adding the community center, which was at least 3 times the size of my house, would overload the heat pump and likely damage the entire system. Not to mention the cost of running hundreds of feet of piping and the energy costs that would skyrocket. I pulled out the original plans and calculations from my contractor, a company called Earthwise Geothermal Solutions. I'd worked with their lead engineer, a guy named Robert Patterson, who'd been meticulous about every detail. I called the company on Monday morning, even before calling Patricia Jenkins. "Earthwise Geothermal, this is Amy speaking." "Hi, I need to speak with Robert Patterson. It's urgent. May I ask what this is regarding?" "I'm Vincent Zimmerman. Your company installed a geothermal system at my property in Beaverton about 18 months ago. I need to speak with Robert about the system's capacity." "One moment, please." The hold music was some kind of nature sounds compilation that probably would have been soothing if I wasn't so stressed. After about 2 minutes, Robert picked up. "Vincent, good to hear from you. Is everything working okay with your system?" "The system is fine. It's the HOA that's the problem. They want me to extend my system to heat the community center." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" I explained the entire situation, including Brenda's visit and the 72-hour ultimatum. Robert listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Vincent, that's completely impossible. Your system is sized for your house only. The heat pump is rated for 12,000 BTUs. The community center, if I remember correctly from the neighborhood layout, is probably around 4,000 square feet. You'd need at least an additional 20,000 BTUs to heat that space properly. Can you put that in writing? An official statement from the engineer who designed the system? Absolutely. I'll draft something today and email it to you by this afternoon. But Vincent, I need to be clear. If they somehow force you to extend this system and it fails, your warranty is void. And you'll likely be looking at tens of thousands in damage. I understand. Just get me that documentation. Next, I called Patricia Jenkins. Her office was in Portland, about 20 minutes from Beaverton. Jenkins Legal Services, how may I help you? I need to speak with Patricia Jenkins about an HOA dispute. Miss Jenkins is with a client right now. Can I take your information and have her call you back? I left my name and number, emphasizing that it was urgent. She called back within an hour. Mr. Zimmerman, I understand you're having issues with your homeowners association. Patricia Jenkins had a voice that immediately inspired confidence, clear, professional, and no nonsense. I explained everything again, and I could hear her typing notes as I spoke. Okay, she said when I finished. First, they cannot legally compel you to share your private property, which includes your heating system. The bylaws they're citing don't apply here. Second, threatening daily fines for non-compliance with an illegal demand is extortion. Third, and this is important, do not agree to anything or sign anything they give you. What should I do? I'm going to draft a cease and desist letter. We'll send it via certified mail and email today. The letter will inform the HOA that their demand is illegal and that any attempt to fine you will result in legal action. I'll also request a special board meeting where we can address this formally. How much is this going to cost me? My retainer for HOA cases is $3,000. That covers the initial work and the first 10 hours. Given the straightforward nature of this case, I don't anticipate it going beyond that. If we end up in court, we can seek to have the HOA pay your legal fees. $3,000 was a lot, but I didn't see another option. Let's do it. I'll get the paperwork to you by email within the hour. In the meantime, avoid contact with Brenda Morrison or any other board members. All communication should go through me. That afternoon, I received the engineering report from Robert Patterson. It was 7 pages long and thoroughly documented why extending my heating system was impossible. The key section read, the existing geothermal heat pump system at 1247 Maple Ridge Drive is engineered to provide 12,000 BTU/H of heating capacity, which is appropriate for the 1,800 square foot residence. Extending this system to additionally service the Maple Ridge Community Center, estimated at 4,000 square feet, would require a heating capacity of approximately 32,000 BTU/H total. This represents a 166% increase over the existing system's capacity. Such a modification would result in 1. Immediate system failure due to overload. 2. Potential damage to the ground loop piping due to excessive demand. 3. Compressor burnout in the heat pump unit. 4. Voiding of all warranties. And 5. Estimated repair costs exceeding $30,000. In my professional opinion as a licensed mechanical engineer, the proposed modification is not feasible and would constitute gross misuse of the equipment. It was exactly what I needed. I forwarded it to Patricia, who incorporated it into her cease and desist letter. The 72 hours Brenda had given me expired on Thursday. At exactly 8:00 a.m., my doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I opened it. Brenda stood there with two other HOA board members, Sharon Whitfield and Dennis Crawford. All three looked grave, like they were about to deliver news of a death in the family. "Vincent," Brenda said, "we've come to discuss your non-compliance." "I've hired an attorney," I said. "All communication needs to go through her." I handed Brenda a business card for Patricia Jenkins. Brenda looked at the card like I'd handed her garbage. "That's unnecessary and frankly insulting. We're your neighbors, Vincent. We're trying to work with you." "No, you're trying to force me to damage my property and violate engineering safety standards." "My attorney has sent you a cease and desist letter. I suggest you read it." "We haven't received anything," Sharon said, though she didn't sound convincing. "It was sent via certified mail and email yesterday. If you haven't received it, check your spam folder." Dennis, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Vincent, be reasonable. We're in a tough spot. The community center serves everyone. Don't you care about your neighbors? I care about not destroying a $30,000 heating system and violating building codes," I said. "This isn't about being a bad neighbor. This is about you asking for something that's literally impossible." "We have contractors who say it's possible," Brenda countered. "Then your contractors are incompetent. I have a report from a licensed mechanical engineer that says otherwise." "Would you like a copy?" Brenda's face flushed. "We're implementing the fines as of today. $500 per day until you comply." "That would be illegal," I said. "And I've been advised to inform you that any attempt to impose those fines will result in a lawsuit. Now please leave my property." They left, but Brenda turned back at the end of my walkway. "This isn't over, Vincent." "I know," I said, and closed the door. The next day, I received a letter from the HOA formally imposing the fines. $500 per day, starting immediately, for failure to cooperate with essential community initiatives. The letter stated that the fines would be added to my HOA dues, and that failure to pay would result in a lien on my property. I forwarded the letter to Patricia immediately. She called me within minutes. "They're idiots," she said bluntly. "This gives us everything we need. I'm filing an injunction today to stop the fines and a lawsuit for harassment and extortion. We're also going to request that the judge order the HOA to pay your legal fees." "How long will this take?" "We should get a hearing on the injunction within a week. The lawsuit will take longer, probably a few months, but the injunction should stop the fines immediately." "What if they ignore the injunction?" "Then they'll be in contempt of court, and that's a whole different level of trouble for them." Patricia filed the paperwork that afternoon. We got a hearing date for the following Wednesday. In the meantime, the HOA sent me a notice that they were fining me for having my trash cans visible from the street, for having a small oil stain on my driveway, and for having grass that was inconsistent in height. I took photographs of everything, documenting that my trash cans were in my garage, that there was no oil stain, and that my grass was perfectly fine. The harassment was obvious, and Patricia added it to our filing. The Wednesday hearing was held at the Washington County Courthouse in Hillsborough. Patricia and I arrived early and sat in the courtroom waiting for our case to be called. Brenda arrived with the HOA's attorney, a nervous-looking man in an ill-fitting suit named Gerald Timmons. When our case was called, we approached the bench. Judge Samuel Morrison, no relation to Brenda as far as I knew, reviewed the filings with a furrowed brow. "Let me make sure I understand this," Judge Morrison said. "The HOA is demanding that Mr. Zimmerman extend his personal heating system to service a community building." "That's correct, Your Honor," Gerald Timmons said. "The HOA bylaws require residents to cooperate with community initiatives. And when Mr. Zimmerman declined, you imposed fines of $500 per day. Yes, Your Honor. The bylaws clearly state that fines may be imposed for non-compliance. Judge Morrison picked up a document. I'm looking at an engineering report here that says this extension is impossible, that the system would fail and cause significant damage. Did the HOA obtain an engineering assessment before making this demand? Gerald Timmons hesitated. We consulted with contractors who indicated it was feasible. Contractors or engineers? Contractors, Your Honor. Did these contractors provide any written assessment? Not a formal one, no. Judge Morrison looked at Patricia. Miss Jenkins, Your Honor, the HOA is attempting to compel my client to destroy his own property to solve a problem that is entirely the HOA's responsibility. They have no legal basis for this demand, and the fines constitute illegal retaliation. We're asking for an immediate injunction stopping the fines and a restraining order preventing further harassment. The judge looked back at Gerald Timmons. Does the HOA have any engineering evidence that contradicts Mr. Patterson's report? We believe that Mr. Patterson may be biased as he installed the system. That doesn't answer my question. Do you have an engineering report? No, Your Honor, Judge Morrison sighed. Here's what we're going to do. I'm granting the injunction. All fines are suspended immediately and are not to be collected. The HOA is prohibited from taking any action against Mr. Zimmerman related to this heating system issue. If the HOA wants to pursue this matter, they need to obtain their own engineering assessment from a licensed mechanical engineer and file a new motion. Until then, leave Mr. Zimmerman alone. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor, Gerald Timmons said quietly. Mr. Zimmerman, you're free to go. Miss Jenkins, submit your motion for legal fees. I'll review it. As we left the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but I could see Brenda standing in the hallway, her face twisted with anger. This isn't over, she said as I walked past. Patricia stepped between us. Mrs. Morrison, any further contact with my client will be considered harassment and a violation of the judge's order. I suggest you focus on fixing your community center's heating system through legal means. We left the courthouse, and Patricia walked me to my car. You did good in there, she said. The judge saw right through their nonsense. What happens now? Now we wait. They'll either back off or they'll make another stupid move. Either way, we're in a strong position. I drove home feeling better than I had in days, but that feeling didn't last long. The next morning, I discovered that someone had filed a complaint with the Beaverton Building Department, claiming that my geothermal system was installed without proper permits and that it posed an environmental hazard due to unregulated antifreeze disposal. The claim was completely false. I had all my permits and the system was a closed loop that didn't dispose of anything. But I still had to deal with a building inspector showing up at my door. His name was Tom Richards, and he seemed annoyed to be there. I've got a complaint about your heating system, he said. I need to inspect it and see your permits. Of course, I said, but you should know this is part of an ongoing harassment campaign by my HOA. I showed him my permits, all properly filed and approved. Then I walked him through the system, explaining how it worked. Tom took notes and photographs. After about 30 minutes, he said, "Everything looks fine here. System is properly permitted and installed to code. There's no environmental issue. Whoever filed this complaint wasted everyone's time." Can you tell me who filed it? Anonymous complaint. But between you and me, this is the third complaint I've had from this neighborhood in the past month. All of them turned out to be bogus. Something's going on with your HOA. After Tom left, I called Patricia again. She was getting tired of hearing from me, but she was professional about it. False complaints to government agencies can constitute abuse of process, she said. If we can prove the HOA filed these complaints, we can add that to our lawsuit. The inspector said it was anonymous. Of course it was, but I'll make some calls, see what I can find out. That weekend, I decided I needed to understand just how bad the situation with the community center really was. I drove over there on Saturday afternoon and found the building locked up. A sign on the door read, "Closed until further notice due to heating system failure." I walked around the building, looking in windows. The community center wasn't just a simple gathering space. It had a full gym, a daycare center, a meeting hall, and several offices. It was a significant structure, and I could see why the HOA was desperate to get it running again. But that desperation didn't give them the right to destroy my property. As I was standing there, I saw a car pull up. An older woman got out, carrying a yoga mat. "Oh," she said, seeing the sign. "I didn't know they were still closed." "Heating system failed," I said. "They're working on it." She sighed. "This is such a mess. I heard the board is fighting with someone who won't help. Seems selfish to me." I wanted to explain, to tell her my side, but I caught myself. It wouldn't do any good, and it might make things worse. "These things are complicated," I said instead, and walked back to my car. That evening, Marcus called me. "Vincent, you need to know something. Brenda's been going door to door, telling everyone that you're the reason the community center is closed. She's saying you have the ability to help, but you're refusing out of spite. That's not true, and she knows it. I know it's not true, but not everyone does. Some people are upset with you. The daycare being closed is a real problem for working parents." I felt my anger rising. "What am I supposed to do, Marcus? Destroy my heating system? Go bankrupt paying for energy costs? This is ridiculous." "I know, man. I'm just giving you a heads up. Brenda's playing the public opinion game, and she's good at it." The next week, I started noticing the cold shoulders. Neighbors who used to wave didn't wave back. One woman who I'd occasionally chatted with at the mailbox turned and walked away when she saw me coming. I got an anonymous letter in my mailbox calling me a selfish jerk and suggesting I move if I didn't want to be part of the community. Patricia advised me to ignore it all. "They're trying to pressure you through social means since they can't do it legally. Don't engage. Don't defend yourself. Just keep your head down and let the legal process work." But it was hard. I'd moved to this neighborhood because it seemed nice, quiet, family-friendly. Now I felt like a pariah. The HOA did eventually hire an engineer to assess the situation. His name was David Mueller, and he was from a firm in Portland called Northwest Engineering Solutions. I knew this because Patricia got a copy of his report through Discovery. David Mueller's report was even more damning than Robert Patterson's. He confirmed that my system couldn't handle the additional load. But he went further, calculating that even if I upgraded my heat pump and expanded the ground loop, the cost would exceed $80,000. And since the community center was on a separate property, there would be right-of-way issues, easement requirements, and potential code violations. His conclusion was clear. The proposed plan to extend Mr. Zimmerman's residential geothermal system to service the community center is not feasible from engineering, legal, or economic standpoints. The HOA should pursue alternative solutions. I thought that would be the end of it. But I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I came home from work to find a construction crew digging a trench in my yard. They'd started near the property line and were working their way toward my house. I slammed on my brakes and jumped out of my car. "What the hell are you doing?" A man in a hard hat looked up from a clipboard. "We're installing piping for the HOA. We have a work order." "You don't have my permission to dig on my property. Stop immediately." The man shrugged. "Take it up with the HOA. We're just doing the job we were hired for." I pulled out my phone and called 911. I need police at 1247 Maple Ridge Drive in Beaverton. Someone is destroying my property without permission. Then I called Patricia. They're digging up my yard. What? The HOA hired contractors to dig trenches in my yard. They're here right now. Call the police. I'm on my way. 2 Beaverton police officers arrived within 10 minutes. I showed them the trench, explained the situation, and showed them the judge's injunction on my phone. The officers talked to the construction crew, who showed them a work order signed by Brenda Morrison as HOA president. The work order claimed that the HOA had easement rights for utility installation. That's false, I said. They don't have any easement. This is my property. One of the officers, whose name tag read Rodriguez, said to the crew foreman, "You need to stop work until this is sorted out. If you continue without the property owner's permission, you could be charged with criminal mischief." The foreman argued, "We have a contract. We're getting paid for this job." "That's between you and the HOA," Rodriguez said, "but you're done for today." The crew reluctantly packed up. As they were leaving, Patricia arrived. She looked at the trench, which was about 20 feet long and 3 feet deep, and shook her head. "This is incredible," she said. "They're actually committing crimes now." Officer Rodriguez took a full report. "This is technically criminal trespassing and property damage," he said. "You can press charges if you want, against the construction crew or the HOA." The crew was acting on orders, but the HOA authorized it. You could press charges against both, but it would probably be more effective to go after the HOA board members who signed off on this. Patricia and I discussed it after the officers left. "If we press criminal charges, this becomes much more serious," she said. "We're talking about potential arrests, criminal records. Are you prepared for that?" I looked at the trench in my yard, at the damage they'd done, without a second thought. "Yes," I said. "I want to press charges." Patricia nodded. "Okay, I'll coordinate with the police and the district attorney's office. We're also going to file an emergency motion with the judge. What they did today was a clear violation of his order." The emergency hearing was scheduled for the next day. This time, Judge Morrison was visibly angry. "Let me understand this," he said, his voice cold. 3 weeks after I issued an injunction explicitly prohibiting the HOA from taking action on this matter, you hired contractors to dig up Mr. Zimmerman's property." Gerald Timmons looked like he wanted to disappear. "Your Honor, there was a misunderstanding. The board believed they had easement rights for utility installation. Did you review the property deed before making that determination? We relied on the HOA's interpretation of the bylaws." "So no, you didn't review the deed." "Miss Jenkins," Patricia stood. "Your Honor, the HOA has no easement rights whatsoever on my client's property. This was an act of deliberate vandalism and intimidation. We're asking that the HOA be held in contempt of court, and that the court order an immediate restoration of Mr. Zimmerman's property at the HOA's expense. We're also requesting that the court impose sanctions." Judge Morrison looked at Gerald Timmons. "I'm finding the HOA in contempt. You have 1 week to restore Mr. Zimmerman's yard to its original condition. You will hire a professional landscaping company, not some crew you found on Craigslist. The work will be inspected and approved by Mr. Zimmerman before it's considered complete. Additionally, I'm imposing a fine of $5,000, payable to the court. And I'm ordering the HOA board to attend a mandatory mediation session to resolve this matter once and for all. If I see this case in my courtroom again for anything other than the mediation results, I will hold individual board members personally liable. Is that understood?" "Yes, Your Honor," Gerald Timmons said weakly. As we left the courthouse, Patricia was almost smiling. "That went well," she said. They're not going to give up, I said. Brenda's too stubborn. Maybe, but the judge just made it very expensive for them to keep fighting, and criminal charges are still on the table. The next day, I filed a formal complaint with the Beaverton Police Department against Brenda Morrison for criminal trespassing and property damage. Detective Sarah Williams was assigned to the case. She called me that afternoon. "Mr. Zimmerman, I've reviewed your complaint and the police report from yesterday. I'm going to need to interview the members of the HOA board. Can you provide me with their contact information?" I gave her everything I had. Over the next week, Detective Williams conducted her investigation. She interviewed Brenda, Sharon, Dennis, and the construction crew. She reviewed the HOA's records, including the work order and the communications leading up to the decision to dig up my yard. When she called me with her findings, her tone was serious. "Mr. Zimmerman, I'm recommending that the district attorney press charges against Brenda Morrison and Dennis Crawford for criminal mischief in the second degree. Sharon Whitfield appears to have objected to the plan and didn't sign the work order, so she's not being charged. What happens now? The DA will review my recommendation and decide whether to file charges. Given the evidence, I think they will. This is a pretty clear-cut case." The DA's office moved quickly. Within 2 weeks, criminal charges were filed against Brenda Morrison and Dennis Crawford. Both were charged with criminal mischief in the second degree, a class of misdemeanor in Oregon, and criminal trespass in the second degree, another class of misdemeanor. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Some people were shocked. Others seemed to think I'd gone too far. But I didn't care anymore. I was tired of being the victim. The landscaping company hired by the HOA restored my yard. They did a professional job, replacing the sod and ensuring proper drainage. The work was completed and approved within the 1-week deadline Judge Morrison had set. The mandatory mediation was scheduled for 3 weeks later. It was held at a mediation center in Beaverton, with a professional mediator named Carol Sanders overseeing the process. Carol was in her 60s, with gray hair and a calm demeanor that suggested she'd seen it all. We met in a conference room. Me and Patricia on one side, Brenda, Dennis, Sharon, and Gerald Timmons on the other. Carol started by laying out ground rules. "We're here to find a resolution to this conflict. Everyone will have a chance to speak without interruption. The goal is to find a solution that works for both parties. Let's start with the HOA. Mrs. Morrison, can you explain your position?" Brenda, looking tired and older than she had when this started, spoke carefully. "The community center is essential to our neighborhood. When it failed, we were desperate to find a solution. We believed that Mr. Zimmerman's system could help us, and we asked for his cooperation. When he refused, we may have pushed too hard, but our intentions were good. May have pushed too hard. I couldn't help myself. You tried to extort me, harassed me, filed false complaints, and literally dug up my yard without permission." Carol held up a hand. "Mr. Zimmerman, you'll have your turn. Mrs. Morrison, let me ask you this. After you received the engineering reports saying the plan wasn't feasible, why did you continue to pursue it?" Brenda was quiet for a moment. "I thought the engineers were exaggerating. I thought they were protecting Mr. Zimmerman because he paid them." "Did you hire an independent engineer to verify?" "Yes. He said the same thing, but by then we'd already invested so much in this fight, the board felt we couldn't back down." Carol turned to me. "Mr. Zimmerman, what outcome are you looking for?" "I want to be left alone," I said. "I want the criminal charges to proceed because what they did was illegal. And I want my legal fees paid. This whole situation has cost me thousands of dollars and months of stress. Would you consider dropping the criminal charges if the HOA agreed to pay your legal fees and issued a formal apology?" I looked at Patricia. She leaned over and whispered, "It's your decision. The criminal charges will likely result in probation and community service, maybe a small fine. But they'll have criminal records." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to see Brenda and Dennis punished, but another part of me was just exhausted. "I'd consider it," I said, "but the apology needs to be public. And it needs to include a statement that my decision not to share my heating system was based on legitimate engineering concerns, not selfishness." Brenda looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. "Fine." Over the next 2 hours, we hammered out an agreement. The HOA would pay all my legal fees, which had reached nearly $8,000. They would issue a public apology at the next community meeting and in the HOA newsletter. They would drop all fines and violations they'd issued against me. And they would sign a binding agreement never to request access to my heating system again. In exchange, I would drop the criminal charges and agree not to pursue any additional legal action related to this matter. Carol drafted the agreement, and everyone signed it. As we were leaving, Sharon Whitfield approached me. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I voted against all of this. I told them it was wrong, but they wouldn't listen." "I know," I said. "Detective Williams told me you weren't involved in the worst of it. For what it's worth, I'm resigning from the board. This whole thing has been a nightmare." The community meeting where the apology was issued was held on a Thursday evening. I debated whether to attend, but Patricia convinced me it would be good to be there. The community center's heating had been fixed using a more conventional solution. They'd brought in portable heating units as a temporary measure, and then replaced the entire system with a new commercial unit. The cost was significant, but they'd taken out a loan against the HOA's reserves. Brenda stood at the front of the room, looking diminished somehow. About 40 residents were there, many of them curious about what had happened. She read from a prepared statement. "On behalf of the HOA board, I want to apologize to Vincent Zimmerman. We demanded that he extend his personal heating system to service the community center. When he declined, we imposed fines, filed complaints, and ultimately attempted to install piping on his property without permission. These actions were wrong and illegal. Mr. Zimmerman's refusal was based on legitimate engineering and safety concerns. His heating system is designed for his home only and cannot safely service additional buildings. We should have accepted this from the beginning. We apologize for the harassment and stress we caused, and we have agreed to reimburse him for all legal expenses. We hope to rebuild trust with Mr. Zimmerman and the community." The room was silent when she finished. Then Marcus started clapping and a few others joined in. Not everyone, but enough to make a statement. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me to apologize. They believed Brenda's version of events and now felt foolish. "I should have known better," one woman said. "I'm sorry I was cold to you." "It's okay," I told her. "It's over now." But it wasn't quite over. 2 weeks later, I received a call from Detective Williams. "Mr. Zimmerman, I wanted to let you know that we've closed our investigation. Since you dropped the charges, there won't be any prosecution. But I want you to know that I interviewed several other residents during my investigation. It turns out this wasn't the first time Brenda Morrison had overstepped her authority. There were at least 3 other cases of harassment and intimidation. 2 other residents have now filed complaints. Will those go anywhere? Possibly. The DA is reviewing them, but I thought you'd want to know that you standing up made a difference. Other people felt empowered to come forward. That made me feel better about the whole ordeal. Maybe some good had come from it after all." The HOA board held elections 6 months later. Brenda Morrison didn't run for re-election. Neither did Dennis Crawford. New board members were elected, including Marcus Chen, who reluctantly agreed to serve again. The new board took a very different approach. They focused on transparency, reasonable enforcement of rules, and respecting homeowners' rights. It wasn't perfect, but it was a lot better. I settled back into normal life. My heating system continued to work perfectly, heating my home efficiently through the winter. Every time I adjusted the thermostat, I thought about how close I'd come to having it destroyed. Patricia Jenkins became a friend. She'd take cases like mine where HOAs overstepped their bounds. She said that my case had become something of a legend in HOA legal circles, a cautionary tale about what happens when boards become too autocratic. The civil lawsuit I'd filed was settled out of court. In addition to my legal fees, the HOA paid me $20,000 for emotional distress and property damage. It was more than fair, and I accepted it gladly. I used some of that money to install a privacy fence around my backyard. Not out of spite, but because I'd learned an important lesson about boundaries. Good fences make good neighbors, as the saying goes. Marcus and I became closer friends. We'd have beer on his back porch sometimes and talk about the whole crazy situation. You know what the craziest part is? He said one evening, they could have fixed the community center heating for less money than they spent fighting you. Pride is expensive, I said. So is stupidity. We clinked our beer bottles together and watched the sun set over the neighborhood. A year after the whole ordeal started, I was working in my garage when I saw a moving truck pull up to Brenda Morrison's house. She was leaving. I watched as movers carried furniture and boxes out of her home, loading them into the truck. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but I mostly just felt sad. The whole situation had been unnecessary. If she'd just accepted the engineering reports from the beginning, none of this would have happened. As I was watching, Brenda came out of her house and saw me. For a moment, we just looked at each other across the distance. Then she walked over. "I'm moving to Arizona," she said. "My daughter lives there." "I hope you'll be happy there," I said, and I meant it. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I let my ego get in the way of good judgment. I thought I knew better than the engineers. I was wrong. Thank you for saying that." She nodded and walked back to her house. I never saw her again. The community center thrived under the new board's management. They hosted events, classes, and gatherings that brought the neighborhood together. Ironically, it became more active and successful than it had been under Brenda's leadership. I started attending some of those events, slowly rebuilding my reputation in the community. People who had judged me harshly came to understand what had really happened. I didn't hold grudges. Life was too short. 2 years after everything settled down, I was at a community barbecue when a new resident approached me. She introduced herself as Kelly and said she'd just bought a house in the neighborhood. "I have to ask," she said, "are you the guy with the famous heating system?" I laughed. "That's me. I heard about what happened. It's actually one of the reasons I felt comfortable buying here. The real estate agent told me the HOA had reformed and was much better now. She used your situation as an example. Well, I'm glad some good came from it." "Can I ask you something? How did you stand up to them? I mean, it must have been so stressful." "It was," I admitted. "But I knew I was right. And I had good people supporting me. That made all the difference." Marcus joined us, carrying a plate loaded with hamburgers and hot dogs. "Vincent's being modest," he said. "He basically saved this neighborhood from a dictator." "That's overstating it," I said. "Not by much," Marcus replied. As the afternoon wore on and the sun began to set, I stood in my backyard and looked at my house. My home. The place I'd fought so hard to protect. The geothermal system hummed quietly beneath my feet, doing exactly what it was designed to do, nothing more and nothing less. I thought about everything that had happened. The stress, the anger, the fear. But also the lessons learned. about standing up for what's right, about the importance of good neighbors and good friends, about the value of professional expertise and the dangers of unchecked authority. The HOA had demanded I share my heating system. A mechanical engineer had said it was sized for one building only. In the end, reality had won out over demands, as it always does. I grilled some chicken, enjoyed the evening, and felt grateful for the simple pleasure of being home. The next morning, I received an email from the new HOA board. They were requesting volunteers to help plan the annual neighborhood block party. I replied that I'd be happy to help. Life, as it turned out, goes on. And sometimes, when you stand your ground for the right reasons, it goes on better than before. My house stayed warm through every winter, my yard healed from the damage, and my faith in community, while shaken, was ultimately restored. The heating system continued to work perfectly, a quiet testament to good engineering and proper planning. And I never, not once, regretted telling Brenda Morrison no.